Hello and welcome to Blue Crescent Tarot. My name is Deanne and this is my first tarot video. I decided that even though it's an older tag, I would use Simon's My First Tarot to introduce my channel because it seemed orderly to start out my first video and talk about my first tarot decks. So initially, way back when, my first tarot deck was this yellow box Rider-Waite Smith with the plaid backs. Of course, many of you are familiar with this one. This is not the actual copy. Like many people, I don't know what happened to that first deck. I think I passed it along to a friend. I kind of have this mixed memory that maybe I had passed it along when I was moving or something like that. So a friend's mom had given me that deck. She was clearing out her library and going through a few shelves of things, and a different copy of this deck ended up on the kitchen table with some books that she said we could feel free to take. So I was very intrigued, took the tarot deck home. At first I didn't really get into the book too much because the definitions were just short. You know, the little white book that comes with it didn't really encompass everything that I was picking up from the cards. So occasionally I would look at it to see what it said, of course, but at first I was just doing these kind of big spreads that I would then just journal about. Turns out it was similar to a Romney spread, but we'll get into that later. Probably will be another episode on my channel. So my first deck, the yellow box Rider-Waite Smith, and it has these blue plaid backs, as again most of you are well aware, and the kind of grainy, of course now we have a lot of different options for these, but you know the classic images, little grainy, little blurry, lovely two swords, right? So this was my first deck that I believe I then passed along or gifted to someone when I was getting ready for a move. So then fast forward several years, I believe it was 2013 when I bought my first house. I had gotten out of a relationship, saved up some money, decided I was going to just buy my own house and have my own baby and do things my way. And part of that kind of reclaiming myself was getting back into tarot. I thought, why don't I just go to the bookstore and see what they have, and I'll just kind of boost my collection. I'll grab a few decks. So I went to Barnes & Noble in my area and picked up this Rider-Waite again, because even though at the time I wasn't super thrilled with it, it was my classic because it was the only one I had had previously. So I thought I'll go back to that and that'll kind of be my framework. So I picked up the plaid backs, and at that same time I also picked up the Gilded Tarot, Ciro Marchetti deck, and this tuck box is well worn, of course. So that same day picked up my first 3 tarot decks. So technically my resurgence into tarot was, 3 decks at once. So these are the images here. This badly needs to be edged because why wouldn't I do that? So here we have 8 wands, and when I was picking out the 3 decks from the bookshelf, I was picking them out for myself, but I also thought maybe I'm gonna start a little Facebook group for friends that I've been reading for in person. That's all I did at that time, was read for family and friends, and I thought, I know some people who would connect to this imagery, and I know some people who would connect to this. And so what had happened is I was kind of shopping for myself, but I realized I was kind of looking for things that might work for a different reading or some kind of connection I would get and think, oh, that's the one for them. So let's see another one here, Night Pentacles, and there was some animal imagery in it, different things, just different than the classic, clearer than the Rider-Waite Smith. I thought some people would relate better to this one because just they could see better. There's a little bit different imagery, something just kind of fun and different, especially for those people who had had readings from me before. So Here's a couple of those, and then the backs on these. So this deck was in that first haul of 3 that I had picked up. And then the third deck that I bought, oh, this did come with 2. It was a kit, and it came with this Easy Tarot handbook. And this actually is not too bad for a book. That was the other thing I was excited about, is having, it had been so long since I looked at tarot decks. I was excited that there was a bigger book. You know, I just kind of always thought, oh, they'll all come with that little white book and it won't be very helpful. This was actually really good. It has some spreads in the back, and this actually is the model I used for my Celtic cross readings. Prior to that, again, I had only been doing these huge Romney spreads, which are still kind of my favorite. But as things evolved and I started working in a shop, I was happy to have a Celtic cross kind of in my back pocket for those longer readings. So it has some spreads in the back, has some tables with definitions, and again was just a wealth of information compared to that original plaidback deck that I had. So this kind of helped inform my basis, my early kind of working definitions of the different tarot cards. So that did come together in a kit, I believe. And then the third deck that I picked up that same day was this Crystal Tarot. And there are a few different Crystal Tarot decks, obviously. This one is the Crystal Tarot by Philip Permutt. And this, I was not crazy about the artwork, but I wasn't really crazy about any of them in terms of artwork, like something that really struck me. I just thought this is kind of a good balance, 3 different really decks, 3 really different decks that I could use for different vibes and different people. So something interesting happened though when I picked this up off the shelf. I immediately thought, oh, I want to read for other people, meaning not just friends and family. And I kind of sat it back down and thought, no, I don't. And I picked it back up again, and I had that same feeling that, oh, this is going to be my deck that kind of gets me into that different sphere of possibly becoming a professional reader. But at the moment, I mean, that was crazy. I didn't really ever have that desire, but when I picked up this deck, that's kind of what came over me. So basically I took the 3 decks back home, got them all set up in my space, and that's actually the first picture on my little intro video. Shows my salt rocks and a candle and a couple moon pictures and this deck on the floor. That was my very first tarot draw in the new house. Right after I got home and I opened all these up, I decided this was going to be my first draw. So I did that, and a few months later I had gone to a psychic fair, metaphysical fair, and my friend had an appointment with a medium, and it was just a 10-minute quick read, and she said, why don't you just sit with me during my reading, and if you kind of hijack it and it goes to you, that's fine. So that's what we did. We sat down with the medium and had a really awesome reading, and a few months later, I believe, I would have to look back at some posts to be sure, but I think it was maybe just a couple months. I had sent her a message, even though I knew she was so busy. She just kind of, her business was really blooming at the time. And I said, I know you're really busy. I'm sorry to bug you, but I just wanted to know if you know of any upcoming events where I could get a table and read for people. And she said, I don't know of any coming up, but I'll keep an eye out for you and let you know. And then the next morning I woke up and she had sent me another message, and she said, actually, I'm having an event at my new shop this weekend, Saturday or whatever. If you come read cards for me on Friday, then you can work at my event on Saturday. And at this point I was just kind of mind blown, because it would be like Michael Jordan calling you to tell you that you could come play basketball in his house, and I don't know, it was crazy. And so then I had all of this anxiety about, oh my gosh, what, she's a legit psychic medium. She wants me to read cards at her shop. So the excitement carried over, thankfully, and I said, yep, I will do that. I'll come read for you Friday. So I went to her shop and read for, not actually her, because she at the time was a little scared of cards, which I thought was funny because she's a medium. So she just, like some people, had a bit of a negative connotation toward them, but she also felt this excitement. And she said, I've been having this knowing lately that cards are going to become part of this, that a card reader was going to be part of my shop. So no pressure or anything, right? So when I got there, she kind of scooted out for lunch and said that she didn't have time between her appointments and that I would read for another person who worked in the shop. So I sat down with that person and I read for them. It must have gone well because a couple hours later, the owner sent me a message and said, yep, she said you did great. Let's have you come into the event on Saturday. So after that event, I think the same day, if I remember, was maybe five years ago. She said, maybe 6. Anyway, she said, do you want to be on the schedule? Could you come once a week, once a month, whatever you want your schedule to be? I would love to have you set up in here. So that's how my professional reading started. And maybe just prior to that, I had set up my Facebook group and, had some clients through there. But my face-to-face in someone's business, right? This, she had the whole legit setup going on. That was my kind of foray into that. And I'm still working there. Of course, not right now because, things are a little crazy in the world. So we've been on a bit of a hiatus. So I'm excited to get back into the shop someday and continue those readings. But after that long rambling story, this is the deck that I use the most in there because this is the deck I took to read for them that day. And when I walked into a crystal shop, and I didn't know that. I didn't know she had crystals. I had met her off-site at an event, and so I just thought she had an office where she did her psychic medium readings. And really, it was that, and she had a boutique, candles, crystals, jewelry, all that kind of stuff. So when I walked into the crystal shop with my crystal deck, then it all became clear why when I picked up this deck off the shelf, I had that inclination. And little did I know that was the link, and I just happened to show up with a crystal deck. So long story short, this is still the deck I use, even though she's changed locations now, she's expanded. I'm going to say 95% of the time this is the deck I use when I'm there reading in the shop because a lot of her clients are people who are familiar with crystals, at least to some extent. So this is what I started using in there. Plus it's kind of, it's easy on the eyes. It does have a traditional Devil and Tower card, but in general, I think that's important. If I know that someone's really going to shy away from that, I have other decks I can use, of course, but that's what I use most of the time. Though now the balance is kind of shifting because I'm not doing those in-person readings. I'm using, when I read for people in my Facebook group or, friends and family, I use all kinds of different decks just depending on the person and the reading and what I'm kind of feeling. But this one, it's a pip deck too. So for those of you who are, it's not Marseille, but, the 2 cups here just has the 2 cups with the crystal in it. So unlike some other crystal decks I've seen, this one has a different crystal for each card. I think only one of the crystals repeats. I think orange calcite is on 2 of the cards, maybe a 10 and a 5. I can't remember right offhand. But by and large, there's a different crystal for each deck. So if that's something you're interested in, this is, I believe, still available, very affordable. Cardstock's a little glossy, but it's not terrible. It's not really slippery or anything like that. Here's the High Priest. This one I really love because it doesn't have the supplicants. Still has the religious overtone, which is, you know, usually fine. But I really like it because then I can read it as, you know, you are that higher knowing, you are that key, you are the channel. So really love this card there. Ace Wands, the elements are really clear on each one. So even though it's a pip deck, I kind of on my own started reading with numerology way back when I had my classic writer, because that's something I had some familiarity with already. So pip decks are fine for me, and actually when you're reading for people, I find it kind of gives more freedom, you know, to kind of wander around in that meaning. You know, what does the 3 mean? What does the 7 mean? So, but then again, this is the nice balance because the majors are traditional. So we have here strength, but then you kind of have some breathing room in the minors. So again, if pip decks are your thing and you're kind of looking for a new one, this is not a bad option. It's a good little worker deck. So I think that is about, oh, and since we're here, there's no naked baby. You could get a sun card that has a fully clothed child on it if that's something that's important to you, right? See? Okay, so this one also has a pretty awesome guidebook. Let's see. So here's like the page that shows Temperance and the Devil. There is also a chakra point, a crystal, and a planet or a sign associated with each card. So there's lots of layers you can read in this too. A little bit of astrology, a little bit of crystal info, and the description gives pretty traditional meaning of the card, and then also some notes on the stone and the chakra. So if you're kind of looking for something new, it's something to dive into, but it's not an entirely new system by any means. I would say traditional with a couple added layers. So not bad if you want something new to play around with. So I think that's it. My first tarot, which is 3 tarot decks. And I hope to be back soon with another video for you. Thank you so much. Love to you all.